We now come to the third last stanza. I look about me now and try to formulate a plainer view. The poet looks around himself. The poet tries to take stock of the situation in which he finds himself. Plain can mean so many things. Plain means without decoration, basic. Plain can mean not beautiful. My wife is a plain woman. I hope she does not hear this. Plain can mean simple, straightforward, honest, without pretensions, and that is the meaning which is most applicable here. The poet tries to take stock of the situation in which he finds himself, formulate a plainer view, a view without pretensions, an honest view, a straightforward view, tries to carry out a self evaluation, a self assessment which is honest, straightforward, without pretensions, without affectations. The poet now divides the whole of mankind into two basic categories: the wise and the fools. The wise survive and serve to play, the fool to cash in on the inner and the outer storms. What does this passage mean? For a long time, I was unable to provide myself with a valid interpretation, a justifiable interpretation of these lines. The entire world is divided into two broad groups: the wise men and the fools. But who are the wise men? Who are the fools? I was baffled. Then, one day, I was reading Sir Philip Sidney's Astrophil and Stella, and I reached the very last line of the first sonnet of the series, Astrophil and Stella 1, and the line goes thus. I quote, "Fool," said my muse to me, "look in thy heart and write," unquote. So who is the fool? The poet's muse calls the poet the fool. It may appear that I'm raising a very tangential issue, but I think that the insight provided by the closure of Astrophel and Stella 1 can be made applicable to the Ezekiel lines. Who is the fool? The poet. In the Ezekiel poem, the entire mankind is divided into two categories: the wise and the fools. The wise are the worldly wise people. They become managers, they become businessmen, they become investors. They are immune to external and internal stimuli. They are survivors. They survive and serve to play. They are single minded in the pursuit of their goals. They are unaffected by everything else. The second category consists of the fools, who are constantly tormented by external pressure and internal turmoil. They are the creative artists, especially the poets. They are extremely sensitive. They have inner storms and outer storms. And they cash in, they take advantage of their inner turmoil and their external problems. And they convert the inner storms and the outer storms into works of art, into poetry. So we have two categories. The whole of mankind is divided into two categories: the wise, the worldly wise, who are great survivors, who play successfully the game of life, and the creative artists, especially the poets, who constantly face storms from within and storms from without, and who convert these storms into art, especially poetry. T.S. Eliot used to speak of the man who suffers and the mind that creates. The man has to suffer if the mind has to create. Poets are particularly sensitive souls, and they suffer intensely, and it is their intense suffering that is transformed into poetry. Thus, we have two broad divisions, two broad categories. The whole of humanity is divided into two broad groups: the worldly wise persons who play successfully the game of life, and the creative artists, especially the poets, who convert their intense suffering into works of art, especially poetry. It's obvious that the poet belongs to the second category. The penultimate stanza is a very fine exemplification of Nissim Ezekiel's remarkable ability to take a very subtle position, a very nuanced position, a very sophisticated position. The Indian landscape sears my eyes. To sear means to burn, to irritate intensely. There is much in India with which Nissim Ezekiel cannot identify. There is much in India which the poet finds unacceptable. There is much in India which sears his eyes, which burns his eyes. But he is a part of India. He has a prominent place in the literary horizon of India, in the cultural map of India. I have become a part of it. However, he is noticed by foreigners who say that he is singular. He is unlike everyone else in the picture. He is remarkable. He is exceptional. He is unique. Certainly the only well-known Indian poet in English of Jewish origin. He is very different from everyone else. So, outsiders feel that he is singular, but the poet himself feels that they overstate their case. Here we have a very fine balancing act. There is much in India which is unacceptable to the poet. The poet is part of India, but the poet stands out, at least according to outsiders. The poet himself feels that the outsiders overstate their case. This is vintage Ezekiel.